Welcome to our shared bubble. Welcome to those who regularly meet here in Auckland and now are having to share at a distance. Welcome to people who are out of Auckland and enjoying the freedom of Zoom. Welcome to people who are visiting and looking for conversation. Welcome to people who are here to listen. Welcome to those of you who forgot to wash your hands or use your QR scanner. COVID suspects are welcome here. Welcome to our children. I can't see any there, but I'm hoping that some will arrive. We've got a cool story for you about Goldilocks and the 3 cell phones. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
My reading is from 2,400 years ago, at a time when the Jewish part of the Bible was still being written. But this reading is not from the Bible, it's from Athens.
Wow.
The writer was Plato, and it's about dirty politics. Plato starts with an ideal society ruled by wise philosophers who had no money or land and could look after their city impartially and unselfishly. But that was too good to last, so he says it was replaced by a city ruled by aristocrats, wealthy but benevolent. That in turn was replaced by a city of landowners. And after that came democracy, and the city went to the dogs because everyone was selfish and demanded things that they couldn't afford. Freedom was their goal, not the welfare of others. America under Donald Trump shows just what Plato was scared about. And after that came tyranny, when things got so bad that only a strong, decisive leader could fix them up. That being like New Zealand under Queen Jacinda and her cabinet. She fixes things up all right, but is she perhaps a bit too ruthless? And then Plato reckoned we would go back to level 2 and start again. We would never, ever get back to the perfect city. Now, I'd like to try writing a chalice. I'm writing this chalice as a symbol of our shared hopes. It is better to light one candle than curse the darkness. Better to let its bright light show through the stand, for its light will melt the dark night at the coming of the new dawn, and hope will be shared by that small flame in your hand. And now, I invite you to say the words of the covenant which we share with Unitarian churches worldwide. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is the sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, that to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony. Thus do we covenant with each other and with our God. For the sermon, I'd like to start off with Plato's comment that democracy is not a perfect system of government because it encourages people who are selfish and irresponsible, and politicians who have to bribe these selfish people to stay in power. Now, I want to make 5 points about, I want to leave Plato behind and start with our situation and looking at a wish list for New Zealand politics. Here's my wish list for a healthy democracy. Number 1 is be well informed and look at all sides of an issue. Education is very important. Second is to lobby our leaders with empathy. Third is to show some respect for our politicians, including those you don't like. 4 is to work for consensus. And 5, if they go low, we go high. So my first goal is to be well informed. This has become a major part of this election because of the very complex issues of COVID-19. We've taken to Jacinda Ardern and Ashley Bloomfield giving lectures so complex that I would included among some of the more difficult university lecturers I attended. But we are having to do this. If we could not understand these issues, we could not vote intelligently in this election. Things that I've learned, some sublime, some ridiculous, but I didn't know them before. Did you know that before this year that when you sneeze, fine droplets stay in the air for days, but larger droplets end up sticking on the walls of a bus or a lift and could infect people hours later? I knew that gene testing could tell you where your great-grandparents come from, but I didn't know till recently it could also tell you where a virus came from, how important that has become, and how important for us to understand it when we vote. Have the government been following this advice correctly? Have we listened to the opposition? There have been a number of opposition experts who disagree with what Ashley Bloomfield is saying. So how can you know whether to vote National or Labour if you can't understand differences like these? A dumb democracy is what we see in America. Please do not let us have a dumb democracy here. There's a battle for facts in all elections, but in this issue, there are startlingly new facts. And this is not just for politicians, but for us. As Plato noted, in a democracy, even stupid people get one vote. Plato's answer was to get a tyrant. Surely a better answer is to educate the public, and that is us. One of my heroes in this debate, besides Jacinda and Ashley, is the man in West Auckland where there was an anti-COVID conspiracy demonstration. People went out into the streets of West Auckland saying COVID-19 was not real, and Bill Gates had secretly visited New Zealand to do something about it. Well, this man was so horrified with this non-fact demonstration that he did his own rival demonstration with a placard and an arrow pointing to the others and saying, "These people are idiots." There's a lot of fact denial in our community, and some religious groups are a prime example of it. That is why I like to include science among my sermons. I believe we need to make science a larger part of our culture because it is democratic. We need people who understand science and appreciate it. The second goal on my wish list is to lobby our leaders with empathy. That's the biggest lesson I have learned this past year. It's been an eye-opener for me personally. As part of my work with the Secular Education Network, I've been lobbying a little bit for 8 years, but this year I really caught the bug and have had correspondence or meetings with a dozen politicians, and to my absolute amazement, I can identify with all of them. This started for me when I was making a submission in Parliament to the Education and Workplace Committee, and part of my preparation was reading the bios of all 11 members of the committee, so I could tune my talk to them. And I found I could identify most of them, but not with Nikki Kay, the National Party education spokesperson. I thought she was cold, snooty and right-wing, but I was wrong. I took that occasion that morning to do a bit of homework and say, what is it then that make people vote for her? And I found that she was very concerned about Chinese students who couldn't get to study in New Zealand because of COVID-19. And when they were the ones who were here, the landlords were evicting them. So I really identified with that concern of hers. I found several political writers who reckoned she should be National's next leader because she's very collaborative and not right-wing at all. She would bring the National Party closer to the centre. So I made a point of inviting her to speak at our service. And I was very impressed. I've become a good friend of hers. And if she was in my electorate, she would get my local vote. She still wouldn't get my party vote. I contacted all the other parties' education spokespeople, and there was not one of them that I did not like. Goldrich Garriman met me for a quarter of an hour in March, and then for half an hour in a second visit, where I hoped she might make Bible in schools an election issue. She didn't agree with me, but she agreed to pass my request onto the Greens Policy Committee. Chris Hipkins would be my favourite politician of all parties because of his courtesy and the way he took our issues very seriously. Even more because he was the new Minister of Health as well. He was a star in my view. Even David Seymour, who was so far right I could not vote for ACT, he too gave me a very good hearing, 15 minutes of his time, and I agreed with two of his principles, freedom of speech and the end of life bill. He is so approachable. He would be a good local MP. If I had been in Eden, I could have voted for him personally. I still wouldn't have voted for his party. So I get disgusted when I read letters to the Herald, read only negative comments about politicians. Nearly all of them have positive merits. The third wish on my wish list is an extreme example of the same thing, to show respect for politicians you don't like. For all my previous remarks, Judith Collins is still a politician I don't like. And I did groan when she became leader, Nikki Kaye pulled out of politics. But I still had to admit that Judith Collins was the most charismatic of the National Party team and one of the most intelligent and one of the most articulate. She has been maligned and sometimes unfairly because of her involvement in the National Party's dirty politics under John Key a few years back. But she came in for a lot of flack that she didn't deserve. There was a complaint made about her connections with a Chinese businessman. It was investigated, and several months later, she was suspended, and several months later, the investigation came out with a clean bill of health for her. But she still didn't get her former ranking back. So there really was dirty politics, and part of the dirty politics, as Nikki pointed out, was that she was on the receiving end. Sorry, that's my conclusion, not Nikki's. She was on the receiving end of dirty politics more than she was at the end, and she deserved to have a comeback. But like her or not, we should respect her. She's an articulate leader of the opposition, and unless we intend to deport all right-wing New Zealanders to America, she speaks for them, and we should respect them. They are part of the team of 5 million. Part of democracy is respecting people you don't like and accepting that it would be bad for the country if we got all things we believe in. As Unitarians, we have no right to demand that other people share our concerns. And the fourth wish on my wish list is to work for consensus. One of my favourite political causes is consensus decision-making. And this is the main virtue of our proportional representation system. I believe it is good that we have 5 parties in Parliament. In politics, we tend to focus on decisions making by a minority of 51%. I believe it would be better if we aimed for 60 or 70%. And the final goal on my wish list is when they go low, we should go high. That idea has gained popularity with Michelle Obama, and I believe it's a valuable tool in our politics, and we should be encouraging it in our own lives. I think Jacinda is good at this, but even more so, I think, is Chris Hipkins. He was in the final debate over the Education and Training Bill, and I watched to the end of that, watching the sections to come about religious instruction, and they didn't very much. But Chris Hipkins was in the chair, and he was superb at going high. Whenever there was a question, he would thank the questioner profusely and say how helpful it was and how important the issue was. When he referred to the background of the debate, he paid a very high tribute to Nikki Kaye, went on about this for several minutes, and saying how good she was to work with and how good she will be in her next position, whatever that is. Whenever he talked about the future of education, he kept wishing for New Zealand, wishing the best for the New Zealand under the next government without saying which government it might be. And he capped it off all by saying that while he was glad to have a season of goodwill in that debate, he accepted that it was going to be out of fashion to show goodwill for a couple of months, but he hoped that we would get back to cooperation after it's all over. So I accept that this standard is so high, it's almost impossible to achieve. There have been moments in this debate when both parties have been completely negative and self-justifying, and Jacinda and Judith have both been trying to outdo each other, being tough and throwing people off their team. At one stage, they were getting so good at tossing people out, I was wondering whether we'd run out of politicians on both sides of the House. I felt especially sorry for the national member who was having an affair with a member of his staff and got thrown out. I thought, so what? He has an affair. But on the gentle side, I recall Dr. Bloomfield refusing to get into a witch hunt of the health department people who failed to ensure adequate security at a quarantine base. I think that was a good lead. If we stop asking for heads to roll, head rolling will go out of fashion. Sometimes mistakes do need to be tracked down. Other times we should tolerate it or deal with it quietly. If we are kind, we can expect our politicians to follow. I invite you to share your own views as we break into, Paul puts us into breakout mode. Well, I'll now blow our candle out, and then if Paul could bring on the slide, we'll say the words together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of unity, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Namaste.
Well, I'd like to read you my closing words. I hope you have enjoyed this time together. May love inspire you, wisdom guide you, and peace surround you until we meet again.